Hey, how's it going guys? It's Nate here. And a few days ago I uploaded a video elaborating on some of Skyrim's more frightening hidden secrets. And that got me thinking, just how spooky could Skyrim get? While it's certainly not a horror game, there's a clear capacity for it to play to our fears if used by the developers appropriately. And there's a handful of times Bethesda did this well in my opinion. An example that comes to mind is the House of Horrors quest in Markarth. Thankfully, there's also a community of thousands of creative modders jumping at every opportunity to use the game's engine in a unique way, many of which have decided to take their own crack at creating some spooky content of their own. So sit back and relax as we take a look at 5 creepy mods for the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. Quick note before we dive right into this list, all of the following mods are available on both versions of Skyrim for PC. They are all also available, with one exception, on the Xbox One as well. Links will be in the description down below. But without further ado, let's do further. Starting off, we have Darkend. This mod takes players to the dark and rather frightening island of Pharos. It introduces new enemies, new weapons, spells, armors, and of course, many new locations. The way Darkend attempts to terrify you isn't dependent on jump scares or pop-ups, but rather the overall tense atmosphere of the world upon which it's built. To begin the mod, the player journeys to a shipwreck off of Skyrim's northern shores, where you can piece together what transpired on the vessel through a variety of clues and journals left behind its crew. In the ship's lower deck will be a strange glowing orb that will teleport you to Pharos whenever you're ready. Darkened certainly has a story, but it's one told without any quests at all. From the moment you discover the ship's wreckage, you'll never be given a quest marker or objective by the game. Instead, it's up to the player to uncover what's happened through environmental cues and play at their own pace. This lack of clearly defined objectives and knowing exactly what it is the developer wants you to do really does underscore a huge sense of insecurity that adds to the tension. You'll constantly find yourself in situations where you have to ask, am I ready to be in this location? Am I supposed to be in here so early on? And that just puts you even more on edge. As you first arrive on Pharos, you'll see what remains of what seems to have at one point been a bustling city and castle, but the obvious desolation and terrifying, shall we call them context clues, makes it obvious something horrifying has transpired here prior to your arrival. And it hasn't left. The mod author cited Dark Souls as a huge inspiration for the mod, and it really does show. Nowhere more so than in the variety of unique boss battles that are able to emulate the franchise's sense of dread and challenge whenever you're confronted with one. Again, I can't overstate how well this mod was able to terrify me without relying on cheesy pop-up scares. One moment I had while playing this mod that really stuck was when I first walked into an abandoned church. I read some journals left behind by a priest that described a monstrous zombie-like plague, and as I progressed through the building, I realized I heard something breathing, and it scared the hell out of me. Oh my god, where are you? This is weird. This is not okay. Suffice to say, Darkend offers an experience I can highly recommend. Next on our list is Vigilant. Vigilant is an already extremely popular, almost DLC-sized mod that many of you may recognize. Unfortunately, it's the only mod on this list that is a PC exclusive due to some scripts that it depends on. Additionally, it was also originally written in Japanese, and some things just don't translate very well, so do keep that in mind. It's primarily a story and quest-driven experience that is divided into 4 acts. It's all throughout a very dark and rather spooky story, though the 3rd act in particular stands out as absolutely horrifying. The mod begins with the Dragonborn joining up with the Vigilance of Stendarr, and early on, you're primarily doing what feels like everyday, not that important work for the organization. Killing vampires, scaring away Daedra, getting cats out of trees, real desk jockey stuff. But as the mod progresses, it takes a much more sinister turn, when Daedra begin to pay a bit more attention to you than you may have hoped for. Similar to Darkend, boss fights are a huge focal point of this mod, and the fear Vigilant inspires seems to be mostly conveyed through atmosphere and the environment itself. But as it also offers a quest line and variety of characters, some of whom you'll grow attached to, there's an odd element of, oh god, what's gonna happen next, which isn't so much as frightening, but still emotionally upsetting nonetheless. Additionally, I have to praise this mod for how above and beyond it goes with respect to player choice, and how so many of those choices actually end up counting in the end. There's a lot of other mods that claim this, but Vigilant actually does it. And it even introduces a new game mechanic called Karma, which builds or reduces depending on the decisions you make, and how much or how little of it greatly impacts how and when the story will all come to an end. Coming at number 3 is Undeath, or Undeath Remastered for Special Edition players. Undeath takes you on a quest to confront an evil gang of necromancers, and specifically their leader, who are searching for the secrets of immortality. But after defeating them, you're left with the choice of abandoning their hopeless endeavor, or continuing it for yourself. The mod is largely necromancy themed, and while it does introduce an interesting questline, which we'll touch upon in a second, that seems to more or less just be a catalyst to introduce its variety of spooky new spells and necromantic powers. The most notable of which is the ability to transform into a lich. Lich form could best be described as the necromancer's answer to vampire lords and werewolves. That said, while necromantic spells and powers definitely seem to be at the core of this mod, its storyline is definitely not without its own merits. You visit a variety of new dungeons, and even take a small trip to Daggerfall and visit the lair of an old necromantic foe. Admittedly, Undeath doesn't brand itself as a pure horror mod, and again, I think its biggest draws are the non-story related content. But many of the new environments definitely sent a chill or two down my spine, and I think it's worth checking out. For 4th spot, we have Clockwork. Clockwork is different from many of the other mods on this list, in that it's far more blatant about its attempts to scare you, and at least in my case, it worked out well. Clockwork relies more on the surprising, creepy, pop-up-esque style of scares than others on this list, and it's uniquely thematic in doing so. It builds tension and suspense by introducing the player to so many things that seem to defy reality, and allowing your imagination to fill in the blanks, which it does in the scariest way possible. To start the mod, you journey to a mine in the Velothi Mountains, which quickly collapses behind you as you enter, meaning your only hope of escape is to go forward. As you advance throughout the mine, you'll notice there's a strange lack of enemies, or really anything that's alive. But you'll quickly realize that despite this, you are definitely not alone. A petrifying entity will begin stalking you, and while at first the ghost seems to keep its distance, the deeper you go into the dungeon, the more flagrant it gets, to the point where it literally starts chasing you. The mod does use custom music. I don't want to say it's got a custom soundtrack, but it's got a custom song or two, and it's used to complement the ghost's presence, making everything all the more spooky. Eventually you'll make it out of this hellish mine and seemingly away from the unexplained spirit, but your nightmare is just getting started. Upon exiting the mine, you'll find Clockwork Manor, a massive, beautifully designed Dwemer mansion that will eventually become a player home. Its only inhabitants are 2 dwarven robots of sorts, but you'll quickly discover that you can't leave the mansion, and there's more to these mechanizations than meets the eye. As mentioned, there's something that makes Clockwork considerably more creepy feeling than the others on this list, as there's this constant fear that something's going to be around every corner. And while, admittedly, that style of horror may certainly have become a little oversaturated in most media, Skyrim's limitations have made that a rather difficult feat to pull off, so this mod is anything but that. Like all others on this list, Clockwork is ready and available for download on both versions of Skyrim on PC and on the Xbox One. And finally, last on this list is Sacrosanct, Vampires of Skyrim. This mod is a radical overhaul of Skyrim's vampirism system that adds in an incredible level of depth, complexity, and maybe even a little bit of moral ambiguity. At the center of the mod are new abilities and spells offered to the player and how they're distributed. Early on, your new powers are more passive in nature, with intimidation advantages when in speech, as well as bonuses when speaking. But as your vampirism progresses, you'll gain powers that seem to benefit more destructive styles of play. Sacrosanct adds in so many new spells and powers, it would be very difficult to go over them all without giving the mod its own video. But some highlights include an incredibly fun new spell that allows you to transform into a mist and then teleport using that, the ability to walk on water, and an entire new school of magicka known as hemomancy, or blood magic. Some of hemomancy's more notable spells include one that causes your foes to grow thorns, another can be used to decapitate enemies, and they're all, quite frankly, an absolute blast. But what really stands out to me about Sacrosanct is how it's changed vampiric progression. You see, now it becomes far more important than ever to constantly be feeding. If you do so, you will be extremely powerful, but failure to feed often enough will cause your player to almost go crazy in a way. Your thirst for blood can become so great that feeding alone won't be able to quench it, nor obviously the debuffs that come with the hunger. Go too long without a meal, and instead of feeding, you'll be forced to drain your prey. Draining, unfortunately, will permanently kill any NPCs you use it on. Essential NPCs cannot be drained. This can lead to some rocky moral situations, because if you're like me, you have to reload a save every time you accidentally kill someone who even looks innocent. That is, if you're playing a good character. So this physical obligation to kill NPCs that often really don't seem to deserve it was one that I found difficult to satisfy when at the same time trying not to be a complete evil villain. Furthermore, there are some major changes to the Vampire Lord form and the abilities that can be used when within it. Altogether, I think the Vampire Lord tree went from 11 potential skills to 31. It's insane. Altogether, Sacrosanct is easily my favorite mod that concerns vampires, and I don't think I can even consider going through a playthrough without it. I've actually been looking for an excuse to cover this mod for quite some time, and vampires are spooky, so it looks like I finally got that opportunity. But with that, we're going to wrap up. 5 spooky mods in, or more specifically 4, the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. Which of the mods featured on this list were your personal favorites? Which have you already played and can personally endorse? And what are you excited for? Leave a comment down below. As always, like ratings are very much appreciated. Links are in the description down below, and I hope to catch you all in my next video. Peace out, everyone.